You are listening to the global network of podcasters dedicated to the pharmacy profession. Welcome to the Pharmacy Podcast Network.
You're listening to FrameworkFocus, the podcast that explores trends, innovations, and insights in the long-term care pharmacy industry. Join us as we connect the entire LTC ecosystem.
I get to share some insights today from a chief financial officer. These are the people that hate me the most because I should never be in charge of any budgeting or any kind of money. Jason, do not let me have the money. You control me. But how are you?
I'm doing great. Yeah. And as a marketer, we talked a little bit before the podcast and just some of the great work that you're doing with some of the pharmacies. I can certainly relate to the marketing budget requests that often come to my desk. But yeah, thanks so much for having me. This is my first podcast episode on your network. Really excited to be here and excited to share some of what we're seeing in the long-term care industry.
We're excited to have you here. When we were in the green room, I was talking to Jason about some of the lack of content throughout different podcasts that are available. I enjoy other podcast networks like Becker's Health. I just think they're a wonderful publication. We've actually been on each other's shows before, and the wide audience that they grab the attention of. One of the audiences that you and I are so focused on, and it's so important to our publication and our coverage of our profession, is long-term care pharmacy. And as you know, I shared before we started recording, I was very proud that my first entry into pharmacy was through SoftWriters. And I was the first sales and business development rep to drive and help pharmacies understand the difference between the DOS-based systems back in the day that had no workflow. It was prescription driven by the individual patient. It wasn't batch. It wasn't doing massive work behind the scenes in order to make long-term care pharmacy, which is so different than other sectors. So having the intelligence of a CFO to kind of dive into today's subject from that long-term care pharmacy position and in part of that industry, from Constraint to Catalyst, interest rates, and the long-term care market. Jason, I'm looking forward to this one. So take us through right out of the gate. You know, what's the state of the nation of long-term care market, and you know, what did it look like before the pandemic? And pandemic kind of wrecked a lot of things, so it made its adjustment. But where are we at right now?
Yeah, so I hate to take everybody back to the pandemic, but we obviously follow the long-term care industry quite closely, right? Because it really determines our strategy, make sure that we're sort of on the right path with our strategy to ultimately grow and build a sustainable business for decades to come. But this sort of storyline is very interesting, and ultimately I'll get to the point, but I believe that interest rates are going to produce, or a reduction in interest rates with the Fed will produce a wave of growth in our industry, and I'll get to sort of the details of that. But just going back in 2019, before the pandemic, things were pretty strong. We were in a good place. Construction of new facilities was healthy. Interest rates were favorable. We look at occupancy, which is really important. I think that the unit of economics or unit of measure that's most important in our industry is the number of patients coming in. And that occupancy was near 90%, so about 87, 88% right before the pandemic hit. Then, of course, in late Q1, early Q2 of 2020, the pandemic hit and ultimately dropped pretty immediately the occupancy from that 87, 88% to about 78. And that represented actually a pretty large number of patients that exited long-term care facilities. We estimate about 250 to 300,000 patients from the about 3 million licensed beds in the U.S. And that it triggered a supply and demand dislocation. Demand nosedived, right? Because families wanted their loved ones at home. Construction slowed because demand dropped. As we all know, it took quite a few years to get back to the occupancy levels that we saw before the pandemic. We all remember material costs rose. I do quite a few house projects. 2x4s doubled in price. And of course, borrowing became pricier because interest rates were rising, right? So all these things ultimately led to really first facility entrance fees fell, right? The law of supply and demand to try to bring residents back. And it took 12, 18 months even for facilities to figure out what is the new world going to be like. And I think, over the course of those occupancy improvements, the prices came down. Further, for our customers and for the long-term care facilities, staffing became a problem throughout the pandemic. I think a lot of those workers went to the gig economy, right? They could Uber or Lyft or DoorDash, and they'd have more flexibility. They'd have less stress. They'd sometimes get paid more, right? So all of these became a challenge for our industry. And for us as a company, I think we did respond quite quickly, and we did develop a vaccine solution in literally a couple of months to help our customers really dispense and report the vaccines to the state agencies. So I think we navigated it as well as we could have, and I had the pleasure of being here throughout that period. On the FP&A or finance side of the business, right? It's the first person that everybody looks to, right? So you have to be able to instill confidence and forecast the business and have the right indicators in the business to understand when do you pause, when do you cut if necessary. Fortunately for us, we didn't have to make cuts. We paused for a period of time. And then on the other side of the pandemic, I think one of the things that was most important to us is step on the gas whenever it was appropriate to step on the gas. So we had all these mechanisms in place, and when we started to see recovery, we invested and really maximized what we called exit velocity, right? Making sure we're not robbing the business of potential opportunity to grow and build new products for our customers. So certainly dynamic and challenging time, but it positioned us to adjust very swiftly as occupancy began to rebound.
I was excited to hear you in your opening, Jason, mention growth, because I'm hearing that from multiple sectors of healthcare and inside pharmacy. We're hearing that from a lot of technology companies who are investing in AI as an accelerant to many things that they're taking an analysis of, including drug shortages and how to avoid it, and what trends are happening year after year with the cold season or whatever it is that makes those flux. They're really starting to dial in. So when you said growth and you said interest rates, that piqued my interest. I really want for the listeners to understand your perspective, because I'm a glass half full kind of guy. I want us to hit some growth, and I want to see pharmacies thriving.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly we'll get to sort of how I believe there's going to be this, I call it a snowball of growth that I expect in the next, say, midterm 5 to 7 years. But if you fast forward to today, it took nearly 5 years to get back from that 78% occupancy to where it is now, about 88%, which is right where it was pre-pandemic. And just to touch a little bit more on the market, that's wonderful. Again, the unit economic is the patient, right? So if there's demand there, then ultimately that will help grow our network. But on the other hand, we're seeing facility construction at its weakest pace since 2014. And because that inventory growth has really fell behind that rising demand for senior housing, it's been driving up that percentage. If you think of occupancy, the calculation is the number of beds available as the denominator and the number of patients in the beds, right? So if you have baby boomers aging, right, you're getting more patients, but if the denominator and the number of beds stays flat or potentially even declines, then you're going to have a much higher occupancy percentage. So it's good news. I think it's a shorter term problem. The demand is accelerating. We have about 10,000 boomers that are aging to 75 every day, and we expect that to continue through at least 2030, if not longer. So again, great news, but I think the biggest problem in our industry now is demand is going to dramatically outpace the supply of facilities really over the next 3, 5, potentially even 7 years, unless construction ramps up. And before it does, occupancy obviously is expected to rise, right? So we see this metric that we're all watching. It's going from 88 to 90 to 92, 95. There's certainly more patients coming in. But again, the supply is one of the biggest issues I think our industry is facing.
Yeah, there's some things that we're seeing a dynamic in community pharmacy starting to expand services to their home base client, their home base patient that has probably been using that community pharmacy forever. And the rise of long-term care at home pharmacy services, I think that will also expand. And I think there's going to be a blend between the two environments of pharmacy services, and education coming from both of those sides is important to the public, to let the public know, hey, these services are available. Technology plays a role. We're going to see more remote patient monitoring technology. We're going to see new APIs from the Framework LTC systems, just like a recent announcement with the expansion of the technology through the launch of Framework Insights, which is a wonderful announcement that SoftWriters got to make, that RxPR, our parent publishing company, got to be part of that press release, which is really cool. So I think that the surge is going to open up opportunities for long-term care pharmacies to stick out and be very competitive in the markets. But back to some of what you're kind of giving us some preface and premonition. What's the outlook for the long-term care industry, and how should investors and operators be watching interest rate policies?
Yeah, you may have seen, you may have not. I follow it quite closely, but some of the indicators as to whether there's going to be a rate cut was just released this morning, so CPI. And the good news is that the probability of a rate cut in the September meeting with the Fed is sitting at about 89%. I just read that from JP Morgan yesterday. But if you think about the current environment, we do have high rates. We have a constrained housing market. And because of those rates, we have high borrowing costs, right? If you go and look at a mortgage or a refinance, it's very expensive for most people. So these variables have led to the less new facility construction. And further, that lower supply has really led to, as I mentioned, higher entrance fees. And while I think that's appropriate, right, we've been in a very inflationary environment, it makes it harder for seniors to move in, right? It's more expensive for them to move in, especially when their equity is locked into their homes. And it's difficult to sell in this sluggish market because people aren't wanting to enter into high interest rate mortgages. So this is where I'm starting to tie all these variables together, and you might see why interest rates are playing a role. And I was looking at some housing market data, and right now it's one of the biggest gaps we've seen in history. There are over 500,000 more homes for sale or sellers than there are buyers right now. And that's very alarming, right? Either people are keeping their homes because they've locked in a 30-year mortgage at a couple points, right? 3-4%. They don't want to get rid of that. Prices are high. And then on the seller side, there's also high mortgage rates. So here's where the unlocking really starts to happen. When interest rates are falling, mortgage rates will drop. it'll reignite the housing sales and unlock home liquidity for seniors. Mm-hmm. Now, what we believe is this is going to generate billions of dollars in capital for the boomers to cover those higher entrance fees. Billions of dollars that will be unlocked, that someone will come in, right? It's going to be long-term care facility revenue. So while we're not seeing the construction at the levels that we hope or need, someone is going to capitalize on that industry. And another source I look at, Welltower is one of the publicly traded REITs, so real estate investment trust, and they focus on the long-term care facility space. And they're up 40% in the last 12 months. I also look at a lot of their press releases and in some cases join an earnings call, and they're one of the big players in the space, and it's clear they're doubling down, and others will too. So with high entrance fees, lower cost of capital, I think investment into long-term care facilities will become more compelling. This is that wave I mentioned, right? It's just going to start sort of tumbling down, and that will ultimately fuel growth for patients and for long-term care pharmacies.
Yeah, a little earlier, I made a comment that ties into this ecosystem that SoftWriters is a part of in leading this long-term care pharmacy platform and technology, which are pharmacies. That's like the hub of everything, of the entire operations. So when I think of that and your perspective on our macro trends, that's perfect to kind of lead into this. But how do those trends connect the investments that SoftWriters are making into long-term care pharmacy technology? We went to your AI consortium that you had in Pittsburgh. We got to see everybody come together. We heard about some of the new functionality. You just released this brand new reporting system and analytics program called Framework Insight. So, what's next? What's in your mind, on your mind?
Yeah, thanks for the plug for Insight. We've been very excited about that. That's our new BI solution, and it's built on Tableau. So it's a very powerful visualization engine. And I hired a few people on my FP&A team. They're Tableau experts. And we're not just trying to deploy this Insight product at the pharmacies so they can ultimately customize and build all the reporting that they want, but we're using it internally for some of our metrics, right? Making sure we understand the ticket volume and what version of our software that's coming from, right? These insights internally all allow us to make decisions more quickly and turn to the parts of the business that need us. So thank you for that. To answer your question, though, I think the trends we've been discussing, so occupancy rates, facility construction, there's still staffing pressures, and demand for boomers are all directly linked to the operational realities of the pharmacy. In our customers, we hear this quite a bit. They're under enormous pressure to do more with less, right? They have fewer staff, tighter budgets, more residents needing medications. That's really why we're doubling down on this opportunity. We see that wave that I mentioned, and we're investing. So particularly, we talk about this at our user conference. We've sort of reframed that as our innovation conference, but we're very focused on AI, really as a way to dramatically improve efficiency and accuracy across all workflow processes, and really the entire medication management process. So for us, we're investing tens of millions of dollars and ultimately dropping EBITDA margin, right? So we're not just taking profit, we're significantly reinvesting back into the business over the next several years to really build AI into our platform in a way that's strategic and impactful. And the way we've sort of approached it, right, this AI, I mean, it's been around here for, 18 months, 2 years now, but integrating it into platforms and companies, putting a strategy around it, I think we've taken sort of a novel and really structured approach. So we map the entire journey of a script throughout our software, really from intake to delivery, and then came up with, based on levels of automation, right? The first level is just decision support. So you have AI as sort of an assistant to help you make a decision. And then sort of on the other spectrum, you have full automation, right? So we sort of created that metric and then came up with nearly 100 different opportunities within our platform. And then we prioritize all of those and build what we call a risk, complexity, and impact matrix that really gave us a clear view of which AI features would deliver the largest benefit while balancing risk, right? Because obviously we deal in healthcare and there's clinical issues potentially if you apply AI to it. So we want to do it in a very, very safe way. So we're ensuring that our biggest investments target the biggest problems first. And over time, I think these AI capabilities will really drive deep automation and free up pharmacy staff to work on higher value, more patient-centered work.
Yeah, the map is really playing out, because I remember hearing from the marketing team and even Scott, when I got to be part of one of your marketing events, that the purposeful of bringing clients together, bringing Framework LTC users together to mind share how AI could truly impact patient care and effectiveness and operational efficiency. Then you took all of that mind share and you guys have staged and you prepared and you're investing back into the product and back into the ability to leverage AI. It's brilliant because it's really setting up a success factor so that we can prepare for the surge in the demographic population and baby boomers, and positioning long-term care pharmacies as staples and even the realm of PBM reform, where our politicians can see how effective these organizations are that are really impacting public health. And I think that this is a full ecosystem that you're part of and that we're part of. And I love this. And I think that, I wonder, what that roadmap really means. During that AI gathering of Framework LTC teams happened in Pittsburgh, we were able to say, hey, what's a real world example? So give us that. How's it going to change? How will this continue? This AI roadmap continue to change day-to-day work of our long-term care pharmacies?
Yeah, I mean, right. I'm sure a lot of listeners are customers. So imagine a prescription entering Framework LTC. I think today there are just a lot of manual checkpoints, right? Our software, like you mentioned in the introduction, it's workflow software, right? So there are a lot of manual steps, from data entry, prior auth, clinical verification, the packaging and toting, the delivery. I think with our AI roadmap in place, I think you'll see many of those steps become either partially or fully automated. But we have been, taking this movement incredibly seriously, and we just believe that the impact is massive, right? Reduced turnaround time, fewer errors, better compliance, significant time from staff freed up, not entering an order, right? We're starting with order entry to automate some of that work that comes into the pharmacy. And I think when scaled across thousands of prescriptions per day, the efficiency gains aren't just incremental, they can be transformative. And not just for the pharmacy or the facilities they serve, also a better experience for the patient, right? I think faster turnaround times. You even think about the staff time savings that we'll be able to unlock if you have bottlenecks in certain manual process steps within the pharmacy, and we're able to reduce those bottlenecks from the 3 minutes down to 1 minute. We actually significantly increase the capacity of a pharmacy to distribute more meds within the technology. So that's why we just think that this is going to be transformative. And we have some really bright minds that are building it within the software in a really safe and responsible way, which is really important for us as an organization.
Yeah, I know that SoftWriters has been part of NCPDP to help kind of write the standards and write the script of what's best information to be exchanging. shout out to Shelley Spiro. I mean, wow, what a legend to kind of help to have started that way back in the day, making me actually feel old. I can start saying stuff like that, Jason. But
I'm in the same boat.
But I'm wondering, AI is a buzzword. There's lots of people that throw that around. Where do you see SoftWriters from a perspective that you're keeping your eyes on markets, you're keeping your eyes on financial players who are obviously involved with artificial intelligence to crunch data and build out predictive models and do all of this stuff? So what's the approach that SoftWriters is taking that you see is different?
Yeah, I think I don't recall the stats off the top of my head, but Scott, our president, and I think it was just 2 or 3 weeks ago, we went to the SCPC meeting, and Scott had the privilege of presenting on AI. And one of the stats we found was how much investment is going into AI today, and then comparing that to how much investment was going into the internet whenever the internet came to be. And AI is like tenfold. I mean, it's just tremendous amounts of capital that are going into it, and we're starting to see, these, I call them startups, right? Because AI is new. They want to be an AI first company. They're building AI, and they're coming into the industry and trying to build sort of point solutions, right? So here's a problem, we want to automate it. I think that's, certainly a business model if a company chooses to do that. But I think our difference is really in a very intentional scope, a very intentional prioritization, and I think most importantly, integration. Integration is critical, and I think that we're the most equipped to build an integrated AI suite across all of our products. And I mentioned the nearly 100 different AI initiatives, which span nearly every major workflow, and we're sort of sequencing them based on that risk, complexity, and impact matrix I mentioned. But that means we're not just chasing shiny objects, we're delivering what matters most in a responsible and safe way. And then I'd say lastly, because of our software already powers a large portion of the long-term care pharmacy market, and happy to say that continues to grow. We continue to gain penetration in the space year over year. I think we can deliver these AI capabilities at scale. And I think it gives us the ability to create efficiencies that more or less ripple through the entire LTC ecosystem. And I think that's what has the teams most excited, is our mission of empower LTC pharmacy, save lives, and ultimately, making what we do best even better, to ultimately allow the network of pharmacies that are our customers to scale through this wave of growth that I expect in the next, 5-10 years. So we're really excited about it.
We're excited to hear about it, especially from that perspective. And if you want to hear more about the innovation of long-term care pharmacy, the Framework LTC Innovation Conference is coming very soon. It's going to be September 15th through 17th, 2025. You can go to frameworkltc.vfairs.com. That's frameworkltc.vfairs.com. Or don't worry, it'll be in the show notes. There'll be a link to going to the registration, meeting everybody in beautiful San Diego, California, and coming together for the 15th annual Framework LTC Innovation Conference. Do you have a speaking slot in there, Jason, that you're going to be sharing some stuff with us?
I do, yeah. Last year, I had the pleasure of introducing some of the AI BI work that BI is our insight product. So it was great to be able to sort of launch that, let the industry know what we're working on and what's coming. That's since launched, and I'll be speaking at the beginning, talking a little bit more on AI and what we're doing there. So
I love it. I'm excited. All right. I have to end with this. It's football season. So what's going on in your head? Where are you, a Steeler fan now? Are you not a Steeler fan? Like, what's happening?
Yeah, I'm born and raised in Pittsburgh. So one of my passions is traveling. I've been to I think I'm at 39 countries, and I want to get to my 40th. But for some reason, I just love this city. You have to be true to the sports teams. And one interesting fact is we're the only city where all of our teams are black and gold. So not everyone knows that. It's black and gold for our Pirates, Penguins, and Steelers. So
yeah, and my accent color too.
Yeah, there you go. There's the gold.
On purpose. Hey, this has been a wonderful episode, down to earth and really insightful episode of Framework Focus. We're excited that Framework is continuing to expand. If you'd like to subscribe to Framework Focus, we are on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, anywhere that they publish podcasts, you can find Framework Focus. And if you would like to learn more, please check out frameworkltc.com. Once again, that's frameworkltc.com. Jason, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your insights.
Great. Thank you so much, Todd. Really appreciate the time. And thanks to all the listeners for tuning in.